Good evening, night owls, and welcome to Whisper Crowley. Tonight, I will guide you into a world of darkness, hoping to help you relax and unwind. Perhaps some of you will even drift into a haunting yet soothing sleep. Before we begin, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And now we begin. It was early spring, and the quiet hum of daily life on the farm felt more peaceful than usual. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting an amber glow across the land. My boots sunk slightly into the damp earth as I made my way across the familiar dirt path that led to the small pond behind the barn. I had spent countless hours working here, feeding the animals, tending to the crops, and watching over the water. But that evening there was something different in the air. A heaviness I couldn't quite place. I stopped at the edge of the pond, the water still and dark, reflecting the soft hues of the twilight sky. The croak of distant frogs filled the air, blending with the rustle of wind through the trees. Yet something about the silence unsettled me. It was as if the usual sounds of the farm, the low moo of the cows in the pasture, the soft cluck of the hens in their coop, had all faded, leaving behind only a silence that felt too loud. I glanced over at the cattle, scattered lazily across the field. They looked peaceful, grazing without a care, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled as I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Probably just the wind, I muttered under my breath, shaking my head and turning to head back inside the barn. It wasn't until the next morning that the first real sign of something strange appeared. I was up early, as usual, gathering the tools I'd need for the day's work when I noticed that one of the cows was missing. It wasn't unusual for a stray animal to wander off now and then, but this felt different. I double-checked the pasture, even walked to the farthest edge of the field, but there was no sign of her. A feeling of unease settled deep in my stomach. I checked the barn, the sheds, and the woods near the edge of the property. Nothing. The cow had simply vanished. I stood by the pond again later that day, my hands on my hips, staring out over the still water. It was impossible not to notice that it was eerily quiet. The usual sounds of birds and insects were gone, and the pond itself seemed to shimmer with an unnatural stillness. I tried to shake the thought that had begun to creep into my mind. But it was there. The thought that had settled like a stone in my gut. Was something in the water. The next few days brought more disappearances. Another cow, then a few chickens. Each morning I would wake up to find one more animal missing. Always in the dead of night, always without a trace. I spoke to the neighbors about it, but they hadn't seen anything strange. No one else was missing animals. It was as though the very creatures I cared for had simply decided to vanish, leaving behind no sign of where they had gone. By the third day, I was becoming desperate. I couldn't make sense of it. I thought of calling the sheriff, but I knew they would write it off as wild animals or something equally mundane. No one would believe me if I said the pond was somehow involved. It was ridiculous. That night I couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and shaking the branches of the trees. But I wasn't thinking about the weather. I was thinking about the pond. Something about it, something deep within its murky water, was calling to me. I decided to go out. I grabbed the lantern, its light flickering in the dark, and made my way out to the back of the property. The pond lay just beyond the barn, hidden from the view of the house by a row of tall trees. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and damp leaves, and the only sound was the soft crunch of my boots against the ground. As I approached the edge of the pond, I froze. There was something different about the water tonight. It was darker, almost black, and ripples spread across the surface despite the stillness of the night. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped closer, my lantern casting long shadows across the water. Then it happened. The hand. It shot up from the surface of the water, its pale fingers reaching toward the sky as if beckoning me. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the lantern as I gasped. The hand was large, the skin slick and waterlogged, its fingers long and unnaturally thin. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And then the hand disappeared beneath the surface. I stood there, heart pounding in my chest, struggling to make sense of what I had just seen. My thoughts raced, trying to convince myself that it was nothing, that it was just a trick of the light, or maybe some wild animal's limb caught in the water. But deep down I knew what I had seen. I had seen something rise from the depths of that pond, something that shouldn't have been there. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off the water. My pulse was hammering in my ears as I turned and rushed back to the house, my mind spinning with questions that had no answers. But one thing was certain now, whatever was lurking in that pond was no simple creature of nature. It was something far darker, something that had been waiting, hidden beneath the water, for a long, long time. The next few days passed in a blur. I couldn't get the image of that hand out of my mind. It haunted me in the quiet moments when I should have been focused on the farm, when I should have been fixing fences or tending to the animals. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it pale, dripping with water, reaching from the depths of the pond, a dark promise that filled me with dread. But there were no more signs, no more strange disappearances. The cows seemed to return to their usual routines, grazing quietly in the field as if nothing had happened. The hens clucked softly in the coop. The pond, however, remained unchanged, its surface as still as ever, as if mocking the fear that had settled in my chest. I tried to forget. I told myself that it had been my imagination, that the hand had been nothing more than a trick of the light, or perhaps some creature I hadn't seen before. But deep down I knew better. It was the silence that unnerved me the most. The way the farm felt different now, as though something had shifted, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The air felt heavier, thicker, and every sound, no matter how small, seemed amplified. The rustle of leaves, the creak of the barn door, even the distant hoot of an owl, all of it seemed to echo through the stillness of the night. I spent hours out in the field, doing everything I could to keep my mind occupied. But whenever I glanced toward the pond, I felt that same creeping unease. It was like something was waiting, something unseen, hidden beneath the surface. Watching. It wasn't until the evening of the 5th day, after the incident, that I finally saw it again. I had just finished feeding the animals when I noticed one of the cows, Luna, a gentle old girl, was missing. I quickly checked the usual spots around the barn and field, but there was no sign of her. I stood there for a long moment, the sinking feeling from before creeping back. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land, and the wind had picked up, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of rain. I didn't wait long. I grabbed the lantern, the flame flickering in the growing darkness, and made my way toward the pond. I could feel the weight of the air around me, like something unseen was pressing in, making each step heavier than the last. As I approached the water's edge, the quiet was overwhelming. There were no frogs calling tonight, no wind rustling the trees. It was as if the entire world had gone still, holding its breath. And then I saw it. Luna. Her body lay in the shallow water, her once bright coat now dull and soaked, the water surrounding her rippling gently. For a moment I thought she was alive, just resting, but as I stepped closer, I saw the truth. Her eyes were wide open, unblinking, but there was no life in them. Her body was eerily still, her legs splayed unnaturally in the water. The pond had claimed her, pulled her beneath the surface, and now it had returned her to the shore. I couldn't understand why. Why now? Why Luna? A wave of nausea hit me as I dropped to my knees, the lantern falling from my hand and casting strange shadows across the scene. I could smell the water, the thick, musky odor of decay. It made my stomach turn. I knew then that I couldn't ignore this anymore. There was something in the water, something that had been feeding on my animals. But I still didn't know what it was or how to stop it. I could only stand there in the dark, staring at Luna's lifeless body, wondering if she would be the last. The wind howled through the trees, but I barely noticed it. The only sound that mattered was the sound of the water, rippling ever so slightly, as though someone was waiting just below the surface. The hand, the one I'd seen days before. I could still picture it perfectly in my mind, its long, gnarled fingers, slick with water, reaching up from the depths of the pond. It was no trick of the light. No wild animal. It was something darker, something far worse. And now it had come for Luna. I stood up slowly, a wave of panic and disbelief washing over me. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but I knew there was no one nearby who would understand. No one who would believe that the pond itself, this quiet, seemingly innocent pond, was hiding something terrible. I knew I couldn't stay here alone. The sense of danger was too great, too real. But as I turned to leave, my heart skipped a beat. A shadow moved in the water. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I strained my eyes, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was like a ripple beneath the surface, a dark shape shifting and twisting, almost imperceptible. But there was no mistaking it now. Something was in the pond. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't wait to see more. I turned and ran, my legs moving faster than they ever had, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of the water lapping at the shore seemed to follow me, echoing in my ears. The pond was alive and it was calling me to return. But I couldn't go back, not now. Not until I figured out what had been living in the depths of that water for so long. What it wanted, and how I could stop it before it came for me next. The night felt different after I ran from the pond. The silence was unbearable, pressing in on me, heavy and suffocating. I didn't know where to go or what to do. The barn felt too far, the farmhouse even farther. There was a sense that the pond wasn't just a place anymore, but a force, something that had taken root in the land, in the very air I breathed. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Luna's lifeless body in the water, her unblinking eyes staring back at me, accusing me for not being able to save her. The image of the shadow, the ripple beneath the surface, haunted me. I knew there was something in the water, something dark and old, but it was just a feeling, an intuition, a gnawing terror that I couldn't quite explain. I woke at dawn, but even the light of day didn't feel right. It was a gray morning, and the air was thick with the promise of more rain. The sky hung low, pressing down on the earth, and the fields around the farm seemed more vast, more oppressive than usual. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My usual morning routine felt hollow, mechanical. I fed the animals, checked the fences, did the things I had always done without thinking, but it was all distant now, like I was moving through a fog. Each creak of the barn door, each cluck of the hens, seemed too loud, too sharp, and I found myself looking over my shoulder every few seconds, expecting to see something moving in the corner of my eye. The pond called to me. It felt like a tug in my gut, an invisible force that pulled at me, a constant reminder of the horror that had unfolded there. I couldn't go back. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face whatever it was that was lurking beneath that still surface. But the animals, there was something wrong with the animals. I noticed it first with the sheep. They had been restless, bleeding more than usual, staying close together in the corners of the barn. I didn't think much of it at first. Sheep were easily spooked, after all. But then I found one of them dead, its throat torn open as if by claws. It had been dragged away from the rest of the flock, its body discarded in the dirt like a rag doll. I stared at the poor creature for a long time, a cold shiver running down my spine. The wound wasn't natural. It wasn't something a predator would do. The marks, gouges along the neck, looked like the kind of thing you'd expect from a drowning victim, the kind of marks I had seen in the water, long and deep, as if something had dragged it under. I didn't know how to explain it, but I could feel it. The same dark presence that had been at the pond was now in the barn. It had followed me, crept into the corners of my home. It was everywhere. I couldn't stay here anymore. I had to find out what was causing this, what was in the pond, and how to stop it before it came for me next. But how could I face something that didn't show itself, that left no trace other than death and fear? How could I fight something that lurked in the dark corners of my world, hidden from view, just out of reach? I grabbed my rifle. It wasn't much. It was just an old hunting rifle, but it had been enough to protect me from coyotes and foxes. Maybe it would be enough against whatever this was, whatever creature or spirit had taken root in the water. But I wasn't sure. I didn't know what I was dealing with, and the idea of facing something unseen was too much. Still, I had to try. I headed back toward the pond, rifle in hand, my heart hammering in my chest. The closer I got, the more the air seemed to thicken, like something was pushing in from the edges of the world, closing in on me. The water was still deceptively calm, and the surface gleamed in the dim light like a mirror, reflecting nothing but the gray sky above. I didn't see anything at first, no ripples, no shadows moving beneath the surface. But then I heard it. A soft splash, faint but unmistakable. It came from the middle of the pond. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The sound wasn't like anything I had heard before. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't the wind. It was something deliberate. Something alive. I took a step forward, the rifle clutched tightly in my hands. The silence stretched, unbearable and thick. The splash echoed again, louder this time. It was unmistakable now. It wasn't just the water making the sound. There was something beneath it. I crept forward, my boots sinking slightly into the soft ground, every step louder than I wanted it to be. The pond seemed to hold its breath with me, waiting. And then I saw it. A dark shape just below the water's surface, moving slowly. It was large, much larger than anything that should have fit in this pond. It was as if something, some force, was shifting beneath the water, a ripple of dark energy that pushed and pulled at the edges of the pond. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could feel it. The water seemed to pulse, alive in a way that made my skin crawl. There was something down there, something that knew I was watching. And then the hand appeared. It wasn't like the hand I had seen before. This one was longer, its fingers twisted and elongated, reaching up toward the surface. It was covered in dark, slick scales that shimmered in the dim light. The water around it seemed to move in unnatural ways, swirling as though the pond itself were alive. I stepped back, my heart in my throat. The rifle felt heavy in my hands, but I couldn't move, couldn't raise it. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the creature in the water, from the hand that reached upward like a beckoning finger. And then it stopped. The hand vanished beneath the water's surface as quickly as it had appeared. The ripples faded and the pond was still once again, as if nothing had ever happened. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my breath coming in sharp gasps. My fingers were numb, still gripping the rifle, but it was useless. There was no way to fight what I had just seen. No way to fight something that wasn't truly there, something that lived in the depths of the pond, in the spaces between moments. I had to leave. I had to get out of here before whatever it was decided to come for me next. But as I turned to go, I heard the splash again. Closer this time. The splash rang in my ears like a death knell. It was close, far too close. My heart beat harder, a frantic rhythm that echoed in the hollow of my chest. I stood frozen, the rifle in my hands feeling like a piece of wood rather than a weapon. The air around me seemed to crackle, thick with tension. I should have run. I knew that, but something kept me rooted to the spot. Was it fear, or was it curiosity? I couldn't tell anymore. All I knew was that I had to see it, had to understand what was lurking beneath that still water, calling to me with its silence and splashes. The pond, once a peaceful part of my farm, now felt like a twisted version of itself. The gray morning had settled into a dreary afternoon, and the light seemed to be fading faster than it should have, swallowed by an unnatural gloom. The stillness of the water was broken only by the occasional ripple, but nothing had surfaced. Not yet. I felt the wetness of the grass seeping through my boots as I took a hesitant step closer. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop. The water called to me, beckoned with a force I couldn't explain. Every instinct told me to flee, to run back to the safety of my barn, to never look back. But my legs moved of their own accord, stepping forward step by step, until the edge of the pond was right in front of me. I could hear the water lapping at the shore, soft and rhythmic like breathing. Then I saw it again. A ripple, farther out in the center of the pond. It wasn't just a ripple, though. It was as if something was pushing up from the bottom, something large. The water shifted, bending unnaturally, as if a great weight was stirring beneath it. I couldn't breathe. I stood motionless, the rifle now hanging loosely in my hands, forgotten. My mind was racing. What was it? What could move like that beneath the surface? What kind of creature could live in this pond, a creature that wasn't bound by the rules of nature? I heard another splash, and this time I could feel the vibration in my bones. It wasn't just water moving now. It felt like the earth itself was shifting, groaning under the weight of something massive, something ancient. Suddenly I saw it. A long, shadowy shape, barely visible beneath the dark surface. It wasn't just a shadow, this was something moving, something alive. The shape twisted and turned, and I realized it wasn't just an animal. It was too fluid, too unnatural. I took a step back, my foot slipping on the muddy bank. The ground gave way beneath me, and I fell, splashing into the shallow water at the edge of the pond. For a moment I lay there stunned, the cold water seeping into my clothes, my chest heaving with panic. I tried to push myself up, but something was grabbing at me. I shot my hands out, trying to find anything to hold on to. But the mud, thick and viscous, clung to my fingers like hands, pulling me deeper into the water. I gasped, scrambling, my mind screaming for me to get up, to get out. Then I saw it, a hand. Not a human hand. It was long, its fingers skeletal and twisted, the skin slick and glistening with something unnatural, like scales or slime. It reached from the depths, curling around my ankle with an almost deliberate slowness. My blood ran cold as the grip tightened. I kicked out, thrashing, but the hand didn't let go. It was strong, impossibly strong. My heart raced as I tried to pull my leg free, but the mud sucked at my boots, and the hand only tightened its hold. I could feel the water around me darkening, thickening, as if something was coming closer, something that was feeding off my fear. Panic surged through me like electricity, but the more I struggled, the tighter the grip around my ankle became. I couldn't breathe. The cold was overwhelming. The water rushed into my lungs and I gasped, coughing. But it wasn't just the water. It was the sensation of being dragged under, being pulled into the depths by something far stronger than I was. I fought harder, desperate now. My mind was racing, but all I could hear was the pulse of the water, the splash as something massive moved beneath the surface. And then I saw it. Emerging from the depths of the pond, rising like a dark tower, was a form. It wasn't solid, not in the way a creature should be. It was fluid like smoke or shadow, but twisted in an almost human shape. Its body seemed to ripple, its surface shifting and undulating, a mass of scales and dark water, its edges constantly changing. Its face, if it could even be called that, was nothing but a twisted, gaping maw filled with rows of sharp, jagged teeth. The eyes, if they could be called eyes, were like pools of black ink, swallowing the light around them. It was a creature made of the water itself, an abomination born of the pond. I screamed. My throat burned, but the sound was swallowed by the gurgling water. The creature's head tilted as if observing me, curious, and in that moment I knew what it wanted. It wasn't just the animals. It was me. It had been watching me, waiting for me to come to the water's edge, to get close enough to pull under. The hand on my ankle tightened once more, dragging me deeper, and I kicked wildly, trying to break free. But I was losing. I couldn't fight it. My strength was draining, my vision blurring. With a final burst of energy, I threw myself backwards, breaking free from the grip. My body slammed against the muddy bank, and I gasped for air, choking on the water that had crept into my lungs. My hands scrambled against the mud, the grass, anything to pull myself out. I managed to get to my feet, stumbling back, but I didn't dare look at the pond again. I could hear it, the sound of something shifting beneath the surface. I knew it was still there, watching me, waiting for the moment when I'd return. I ran. I didn't stop to look back. The barn was all I could think of, the farmhouse, anything but the water. But as I ran, I could feel the eyes on my back, the weight of the thing in the pond pressing in on me, suffocating me. I didn't stop running until I reached the barn, and even then I could hear the splash echoing in my mind. But I was safe for now. For now, I wasn't sure if I was ever truly safe again. Because whatever it was, whatever lived in that pond, it wasn't finished with me. Not yet. The night dragged on in silence, but the stillness only amplified the haunting memories that plagued me. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I leaned against the barn door, staring out into the vast darkness. The pond was just beyond the tree line, a mere few hundred yards away, but it felt like miles. It was as if the very ground between me and that cursed water had become alien, foreign, hostile. I tried to shake the image of that creature from my mind, but the memory clung to me like the mud on my boots, stubborn and suffocating. I could still see the swirling mass of dark water, the gaping maw, the twisting shadows, its eyes, black and unblinking, locked on me in that moment before it dragged me under. I could still feel the cold of the pond's grip, and that hand, that terrible hand, curling around my ankle. I couldn't explain it. I knew it couldn't be real, not in any logical sense. But it had been. It had been real, and somehow I had barely escaped. The hours passed in a haze. I paced back and forth in the barn, my thoughts spiraling. I could hear the distant calls of night creatures outside, the chirp of crickets, the rustle of leaves. But all I could think about was the pond, and the thing that lived beneath its murky surface. The sound of water lapping at the shore seemed to fill my ears, even though I hadn't heard it for hours. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't keep running, hiding. But what else could I do? I couldn't very well walk away from my farm. The idea of leaving everything behind, my land, my animals, everything I'd worked for, felt like a betrayal. But how could I stay when there was something out there, something so horrific lurking so close? I walked to the window, my fingers brushing the edge of the wooden sill. I peered out into the night, the shadows stretching across the fields, the farmhouse barely visible in the dim light. In the distance, I could just make out the faint outline of the pond. It sat there silent, almost too still, like a wound waiting to open. I had to know. I had to face it. I couldn't live like this, constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid of the next time it would pull me under. I grabbed my coat from the hook and made my way out of the barn, the air biting at my skin. I could hear my footsteps crunching on the frost-covered earth, and I forced myself to walk slowly, methodically. Every step felt like a choice that could either bring me closer to safety or drag me into the depths once again. As I approached the edge of the field, I could see the silhouette of the pond ahead, dark and foreboding. The trees surrounding it seemed to stand like sentinels, their twisted branches reaching out like fingers. It was eerily quiet now, not even the sound of the wind could be heard. The water, which had once been peaceful, now looked like a dark mirror reflecting the emptiness of the world around it. A shiver ran down my spine as I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. I scanned the surface of the water, but there was no sign of movement. No ripples, no shadows, no anything. It looked like nothing more than a regular pond in the middle of a quiet farm. But I knew better. The silence was just as dangerous as the noise. I hesitated for a moment, my mind screaming at me to turn back, to leave before I made a mistake. But it was too late for that. I had already come this far. I needed to know what was hiding beneath that surface, lurking in the dark. I crouched down at the edge of the water, my hands trembling as I reached for a stick. I prodded the surface lightly, testing it. Nothing happened. The water remained still, like glass, almost as if it were waiting. And then the stillness broke. A ripple. It started at the far end, barely noticeable at first, but then it spread. The water trembled. I gripped the stick tighter, staring at the shifting surface. The movement was slow, deliberate, like something was making its way to the edge, inch by inch. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt the icy grip of fear clamp around my chest. I knew what was coming, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I couldn't look away, not now. And then I saw it again. The hand. This time it wasn't as subtle as before. This time it was unmistakable. The pale, skeletal fingers emerged slowly, curling and stretching like a snake rising from the depths. But this time it was different. The hand was larger, stronger, and there were more of them. Another hand appeared beside it, then another, until the water was rippling wildly as something massive began to surface. My blood ran cold. I couldn't breathe. The creature rose from the depths once again, but this time I saw more than just its twisted, amorphous shape. This time I could see its body, long and serpentine, covered in scales that shimmered in the moonlight, slick and glistening. Its eyes were open wide, glowing with an unnatural light, black and swirling with endless darkness. I staggered back, my legs giving way beneath me, and I fell to the ground. The rifle which I had clutched so tightly was now useless. I was too far from it. The creature's form twisted and undulated, breaking the surface of the pond like a nightmare made flesh. Its body was vast, stretching out like a shadow consuming the water. It had no clear shape, no definite structure, just a mass of writhing limbs, slithering and coiling, a grotesque spectacle that made my skin crawl. It was real, and it was coming for me. I scrambled backward, panic flooding my senses. My heart raced, and I could hear the pounding of my pulse in my ears. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was run. I turned, my legs shaking beneath me, and sprinted back toward the barn, the sound of the water splashing behind me like the footsteps of something chasing me. I could feel the ground shaking as the creature moved, the very earth trembling beneath my feet. I didn't dare look back. I reached the barn, throwing myself inside and slamming the door shut behind me. The sound of the splashes still echoed in my ears, but I was safe. For now, I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, my heart still racing in my chest. I could still feel the presence of that thing, its eyes burning into my back, waiting, watching. I don't know how long I sat there, trembling, my mind whirling. But eventually I knew. It wasn't over. It never would be. I hope you enjoyed the first story. If you did, don't forget to leave a like, but if I didn't do my job well, feel free to give it a thumbs down. Either way, drop a comment and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, let's continue. Have you ever taken a photograph, thinking you had captured something beautiful, only to later discover that there was something else? Something you didn't see at the time, something that shouldn't have been there. I didn't think much of it at first. It was a hobby, really. Photography. Just something to pass the time. Living alone in a small town in Missouri, I didn't have much else to do after dark. Most nights I wandered around with my old camera, snapping shots of the streets, the empty parks, the old lamp posts that lined the quiet roads. The lamplights cast long shadows across the pavement, their yellow glow casting a calm, almost nostalgic hue to the surroundings. They reminded me of simpler times, of childhood, of the stories my father used to tell me when I was young. It was on one of these nights that I first saw the figures. At least I think they were figures. I had been walking along a stretch of road near an old, abandoned railway track. The only sound was the rustling of the trees in the cool breeze and the occasional chirp of a lone cricket. It was peaceful, serene even, at least on the surface. The light from the lamp posts shone through the fog that had begun to roll in. The street was empty, as it always was at this hour. I raised my camera to take another shot of the lantern post at the end of the road. The lens zoomed in and I framed the shot carefully, the lamp casting a halo of soft light on the surrounding grass. I pressed the shutter and the camera clicked in the still night. I didn't see anything unusual when I checked the photo on the screen. It was just another photograph of an empty street, except for one thing. There was a figure standing beneath the street light. At first, I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. It was probably the fog or the angle of the light. Maybe it was a trick of the shadows. But I zoomed in on the image, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a man, or something like a man, standing still under the lantern. But there was no face. Just a featureless blur where his head should have been, as if someone had scrubbed it out of the photograph. The rest of the figure was dark, shrouded in the same indistinct blur, the outlines of his body melting into the night around him. And yet the silhouette was there, clear as day. I hadn't seen anyone when I took the photo. There hadn't been anyone on the street at all. But the figure was there in the image, as if he had been standing right there the whole time. At first, I thought it was a technical glitch, something wrong with my camera. So I checked the settings, fiddled with the lens, made sure the image was in focus. But nothing was wrong. The camera was fine. Everything else in the photo was sharp and clear, except for that figure. I shook my head, dismissing it as just a quirk of the night, a trick of the light. But that figure lingered in my mind. It nagged at me. The next night I decided to go back to the same spot to take another photograph just to see if the same thing happened again. Maybe I had misjudged the lighting. Maybe it had been a weird reflection from the fog. I needed to know. The fog was thicker that evening, and the streets seemed even quieter than before. I could barely see a few feet ahead of me, but I was determined. The lamp post at the end of the road loomed like a shadow, barely visible through the haze. I stood beneath it, lifted my camera, and took another shot. This time I waited. I stared into the darkness, willing myself to see something, anything, move. But there was nothing. No shadows. No figures. Just the lamplight and the thickening fog. I checked the screen again and my heart dropped. There, standing under the light once again, was the same figure. The same featureless, shadowy form. And this time there was no mistaking it. The figure was closer. Much closer. It had moved toward me since the last shot. My stomach churned. How was this possible? How had it moved? There was no one there. There couldn't have been. I was alone. I had been alone. And yet the figure. It was there. And now it was closer, standing just on the edge of the light, its form now visible against the glowing halo of the lamp. I felt a strange sensation crawl up my spine, a coldness that seeped into my bones. My eyes locked on the screen, unable to look away from the thing standing beneath the light. The silence of the night grew heavier, thicker, as if the air itself had turned oppressive. The figure didn't move, didn't change. It simply stood there, staring at me from the darkness. I took a step backward, my hands shaking as I tried to process what I was seeing. It didn't make sense. It couldn't. I had to be seeing things. But then something odd happened. The figure tilted its head just slightly, as if acknowledging my presence. The air around me seemed to tighten, as if the very street itself was holding its breath. I didn't want to take another photo. I didn't want to see any more. But my fingers, against my better judgment, pressed the shutter button again. And when the picture flashed on the screen, I could see the figure clearly now. Its arms were stretched out, reaching toward me, though the movement seemed unnaturally slow, as if the world around it had stopped. The featureless face was still there, no eyes, no mouth, no nose, just a blur. But the presence of it, the absolute absence of anything familiar, was enough to freeze me to the spot. It was as if it was waiting for me. I couldn't breathe. I turned and ran. Ran back down the street, away from the light, away from the figure. My mind was spinning, trying to understand what I had just witnessed. But nothing made sense. The only thing I knew for sure was that something was there. Something was waiting. The rest of that night was a blur. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see that figure following me, its featureless face watching from the shadows. When I returned home, I sat down with my camera, scrolling through the photos again. I could see them, more figures, more shadows, appearing under streetlights, moving closer, standing still. But always featureless, always unknowable. I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I knew this. These things, whatever they were, weren't supposed to be seen. And now they were all I could see. I don't know if I'll ever be able to go back out there again. I don't know if I can live with what I've captured on film. But I do know this, the figures are watching. And I think they know I'm watching them too. The photos haunted me. Every time I looked at them, they felt different, colder. My eyes kept drifting to the strange shapes standing beneath the streetlights, their formlessness creeping into my mind like a virus. I couldn't help but wonder if I was losing my mind. Maybe I was just saying things. But even as I tried to rationalize it, a sinking feeling in my chest told me this was more than just an optical illusion. There was something in those images. Something that shouldn't have been. I couldn't let it go. There was a gnawing obsession building inside of me. The photographs felt like pieces of a puzzle, scattered and incomplete, but if I could just find the missing part, if I could just figure out what I was dealing with, it would all make sense. I had to take more photos. The next evening, I returned to the street. The fog was even thicker now, and the dim light from the street lamps seemed to do little to push the darkness back. My breath hung in the cool air, and the ground beneath my feet felt damp, as though it too was holding its breath. I didn't know what I was expecting, what I wanted to happen, but it was almost as if my feet were moving without me. The street was empty. Not a soul in sight. The silence was oppressive, but it was the kind of silence that always preceded something just out of reach, hiding behind the shadows. I stood beneath the street light, my camera ready in my hands. I didn't look around for too long, afraid to see anything out of the corner of my eye. Instead, I focused on the camera lens. I didn't care what it caught this time. I just needed to know. I needed to see more. I raised the camera to my face and clicked the shutter, the soft sound of the camera's click slicing through the thick fog. Nothing. I took another photo, and then another. My fingers trembled as I checked each one. No figures, no faces. Nothing. I started to feel stupid. It was just my mind playing tricks on me. I began to relax, telling myself that the photos were just the product of an overactive imagination. Maybe it had been the angle of the lights, the fog, or maybe I was just paranoid. But then I took one more shot. I saw something move in the corner of my vision. A flicker of shadow. At first, I dismissed it as nothing more than my nerves, but when I checked the photo on the camera, I froze. There, standing beneath the streetlight, was a figure. No, not just a figure. It was different this time. The shape was more defined, more solid than before. It looked almost like a person, but something was wrong. The proportions were off, too tall, too thin. And there were no eyes, no mouth, nothing recognizable at all. Just an elongated shape standing under the light. It felt as though the air around it had grown heavier, like the very atmosphere had been warped by its presence. I zoomed in on the image, my heart racing. The figure was no longer just standing under the light. It was moving toward me. Its arms were stretched out unnaturally, hanging limp and still. The limbs seemed impossibly long, twisted as they reached for something in the air. It had to be a trick of the light, a shadow, but it didn't feel like that. It felt wrong. I looked up from the camera. The street was still empty. The fog was so thick now that I could barely make out the faint outline of the lamppost in front of me. It was as if the world itself had become a blur of shadows and fog, indistinct and strange. My heartbeat pounded in my chest, each beat louder than the last. I turned to leave, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone anymore. I took a step back, glancing over my shoulder. Nothing. I turned back and lifted the camera again. I told myself I was being ridiculous. My mind was just playing tricks on me. There was no one there. But then I clicked the shutter again. This time, the image that flashed on the screen made my blood run cold. The figure was closer now, its arms reaching further, stretching impossibly long. The blurry face, or what might have been a face, seemed to be staring directly into the camera, though I couldn't make out any features. It was like it was watching me. It knew I was watching it. I quickly shoved the camera into my jacket pocket and bolted. My legs felt like jelly as I stumbled away, but I couldn't seem to move fast enough. The image of that figure, the darkness around it, the feeling of it growing closer with every shot, was burned into my mind. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. The engine roared to life, and I didn't look back as I sped away, the headlights cutting through the fog, illuminating the empty street. But even as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, following me. Back at home, I locked the door, double-checked the windows, and sat in front of my desk, staring at the photographs. I looked at the figure over and over, the unnatural stretch of its limbs, the eerie stillness of its posture. It was too much to ignore. I started to research. I combed through old folklore, searching for anything that could explain what I was seeing. A shadow man, a wraith. I found nothing that matched what I had photographed. Nothing at all. I couldn't stop myself from going back. There was something magnetic about it. Every night since I had returned to that same street, camera in hand, hoping for answers. But each time the photos only grew stranger. Each time the figures got closer. Now I was afraid to sleep. I was afraid to look at the photos. But more than that, I was afraid that they had noticed me. That I wasn't just saying them, they were seeing me too. What did they want? Why were they standing beneath the lights? Was it the camera? Was it something about the way it saw the world that allowed them to be captured? Or was it something else? I didn't know if I was ready for the answer. The figure in the last photo had stayed with me. It wasn't the first time I'd felt a sense of dread after an encounter, but this was different. Something about that thing, the thing in the photos, felt personal. It wasn't just an odd shape under a streetlight anymore. It felt hungry. I couldn't stop looking at the photo, even though every time I did, it made my stomach twist. The eerie stillness of it, the unnatural elongation of the arms, that formless face staring at the camera. The deeper I looked, the more I thought I could see it moving, flickering like a shadow just on the edge of my vision. I didn't want to go back. I told myself that I'd had enough, that I should leave the street alone. But the hunger in that thing was gnawing at me, pushing me to return. I couldn't get away from it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that stretch of street beneath the lamplight. I could almost hear the soft click of the camera shutter in my mind, followed by that eerie silence. And then the feeling of being watched. I couldn't stop. I had to know more. The next night I went back. The fog had rolled in thicker than before, swallowing the street like it was alive. The air felt damp, clinging to my skin, as if the world was breathing through me. I stepped onto the familiar sidewalk, the echo of my footsteps ringing out in the cold air. The streetlights were dimmer tonight, their yellowish glow barely cutting through the mist. The dark was heavier than usual, and I felt it pressing in on me from all sides. I raised the camera to my face, trying to steady my shaking hands. I was aware of every little sound, every shift of the fog, every creak of a branch, every distant hum of a car engine in the far distance. It was all too quiet, too still. The first photo came out normal. The second, too. And the third, nothing. No figures. I exhaled, trying to calm myself. The dread wasn't as intense this time, but it still lingered. I set my camera down and glanced around, just for a moment. The street was empty. Or at least I thought it was. I turned back to the camera, thinking of the hunger in that last photo. What was it? What did it want from me? That's when I heard it. A soft scraping sound. A shuffle almost too faint to catch at first, but it was there. It was a strange, guttural noise, like something dragging itself along the ground. The sound seemed to be coming from somewhere deep in the fog, too far away to pinpoint but far too close for comfort. My heart skipped a beat. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I told myself it was nothing. Just the wind, the fog playing tricks on me. But even as I reasoned with myself, the scraping grew louder. Closer. I snapped another photo, the camera shutter breaking the silence. I didn't check the picture right away. I couldn't. I had to be ready for whatever was coming. But as soon as I lowered the camera, my eyes scanned the street again. The fog had thickened, swirling and shifting in a way that felt deliberate. I froze. There, just past the lamppost, something was moving. It wasn't a person, at least not in the way I understood people. It was tall, much taller than any man I'd ever seen. And it wasn't walking. No, it was sliding, shifting through the fog like it was part of it, merging with the darkness itself. It was the same shape, the same elongated arms, but this time it was closer. Much closer. My breath caught in my throat. I took another photo, too, in quick succession. Each click felt like a nail in the coffin. But I had to know. I couldn't look away. I couldn't stop myself. The figure stood beneath the streetlight, its shape bending and stretching as though it was growing, shifting. I tried to convince myself it was just an illusion, just the fog distorting things, playing tricks on my mind. But it was. The figure reached out, its long arms moving with an unnatural fluidity, and I saw the faintest flicker of something, an outline of a face, but no eyes, no mouth, just empty space, like a void staring back at me. And then, before I knew what was happening, the thing moved. It wasn't a sudden rush or a lunge. It was slow, methodical, almost too deliberate, like it had all the time in the world to approach. I couldn't tear my eyes away as it slid closer, the fog parting around it, revealing its stretched form with every passing moment. My feet refused to move, like I was rooted to the spot, unable to escape. I could feel the air grow heavier, pressing down on me. The world felt too small, too contained, as though this thing was taking up all the space around me. Another click of the camera, and this time I looked at the photo immediately. The figure was in it, right in front of the streetlight, its limbs reaching toward the camera. But there was something different this time. Something I hadn't noticed before. The arms longer, thinner, and now there were fingers, or what should have been fingers, reaching through the fog. Each one was unnaturally elongated, their joints bent at angles that were impossible. They looked like claws, but they were. They were something else. My pulse quickened as I glanced at the street behind it. Nothing but fog. But that thing. It was coming closer, and now I saw it clearly. Its face, or the absence of one, was staring directly at me through the lens, the darkness in its features pulling me in, sucking the light out of the world. I dropped the camera. I turned to run. But before I could take a step, a sharp crack rang out from behind me. The streetlight flickered once, then went out. The world plunged into darkness. The darkness hit like a physical force, wrapping around me, pulling me into its suffocating embrace. I could no longer see the shape, the figure that had been lurking beneath the lamplight. The fog had swallowed it whole. But in the absence of light, I could hear it. The shuffle, the scrape of something dragging along the ground. My heart thundered in my chest as my body screamed at me to run, to get out of there, to escape before whatever that thing was could reach me. But my legs felt like lead, unresponsive, frozen by fear. I stumbled backward, trying to feel my way through the dense fog. The camera, my stupid camera, was still on the ground where I had dropped it, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it. My hands were shaking too violently, and I couldn't remember where I'd dropped it, couldn't remember the path to it. The world had become a blur of gray, the fog so thick that I couldn't see a foot in front of me. Every creak, every whisper in the wind made my skin crawl. I could feel eyes on me, feel the presence of something unnatural drawing closer. I managed to gather enough strength to turn around and begin moving. My movements were slow at first, tentative, as I tried to find some kind of familiar landmark in the fog. The street had never looked like this before. The silence was deeper now, suffocating. Even the usual sounds of the night, the chirping of crickets, the distant hum of traffic, had gone silent. The fog had absorbed everything, and I was alone with whatever haunted this place. My breath came in sharp, shallow bursts as I pushed through the mist, but each step felt like it was leading me nowhere. No familiar streets, no sense of direction. I wasn't even sure where the road ended and the fields began anymore. I was lost. Then there it was again. That scraping sound. Closer now. It came from behind me, then to my left, and then above me. I couldn't move. Something was circling me. It was toying with me, watching me, as if it were aware of the terror flooding my body. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. That sickening dread that I wasn't alone. That I hadn't been alone since I'd set foot on this street. I took another slow step, my pulse pounding in my ears, and then I heard it. A voice, but it wasn't a human voice. It was a whisper, a breath that cut through the fog, curling around my neck like an icy hand. It was low, distorted, inhuman, too deep to belong to anything I knew. The sound rattled in my bones, sending shivers down my spine. Turn around, it breathed. I didn't want to. I didn't dare. But my body betrayed me. My head turned slowly, too slowly, as if moving in slow motion. My eyes scanned the thick fog, trying to make out any shape, any movement. The mist seemed to pulse and shift, like it was alive, bending in on itself. And then through the grayness, I saw it. The figure was standing just ahead of me now, more solid, more tangible than before. It was taller, impossibly tall, its shape stretching far above the light posts, its limbs twisted and crooked. The fingers, those long, grotesque claws, reached toward me, twitching and curling as if they were eager to grab me. The absence of a face only made it worse. It wasn't a man. It wasn't anything that belonged in the world I knew. I took a breath, my chest tightening as the air grew heavier, more suffocating. There was no way out, no escape. The fog was closing in on me, the creature inching closer. I knew I couldn't outrun it. Not in the dark, not in the thick mist. It was toying with me, pulling me deeper into its grasp. "Why are you here?" the whisper came again, and this time it seemed to come from all around me, as if it were inside my head. I stumbled backward, my legs weak, my breath ragged. I felt the weight of the thing's gaze upon me, the absence of its eyes, yet somehow I knew it was watching me. Watching my every move. The camera. It was on the ground. I had to get the camera. I had to get the photo. The last photo. It was the only way to prove I wasn't insane. That I wasn't imagining this thing. With every ounce of strength I had left, I lunged for the camera, grabbing it with trembling hands. The cold metal felt heavy, lifeless, like a tool for something far darker than photography. I snapped another shot, my fingers fumbling as I pressed the shutter. The flash briefly illuminated the fog, casting long, eerie shadows that danced across the mist. And in that brief instant, I saw something that I hadn't noticed before. There were more of them. All around me, like shadows stretching out of the fog, there were figures. Tall, thin, monstrous things, each one a distortion of a human shape. Some were far off, others were moving closer. And they were all staring at me. Their faceless eyes burned into me, even though they had no faces. I stumbled to my feet, trying to pull myself together. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just needed to get out. The thing closest to me, the one that had been following me all this time, stretched its arm out slowly. The claws twitched. It reached for me. I turned and ran. But the fog seemed to close in tighter, and no matter how fast I ran, it felt like the world was shrinking around me. The street that had once felt so familiar, so safe, had become a maze, a trap. I could hear the things behind me, their movements just beyond the edge of the fog, their whispers growing louder. And then the scraping came again. The unmistakable sound of claws on concrete and something else. Something heavier, deeper, closer. I didn't dare look back. But I could hear them. I could feel them. They were getting closer. I kept running, every breath tearing through me like shards of glass. My legs were burning, my body screaming in protest, but I couldn't stop. The fog, thick and suffocating, pressed in from all sides, choking out any hope of escape. The path had disappeared. There was no road, no sign of the town, just endless mist and the sound of claws scraping across the concrete. They were behind me, I could feel it. The weight of their presence, their gaze, it was all consuming. Each time I dared to glance over my shoulder, there was nothing, just the same swirling gray. But the noise, the movement, the sound of something shifting and breathing was all around me. The camera, still clutched tightly in my hands, felt like a weight that would drag me down, like a tether I couldn't break. I didn't know why I still had it. Maybe I thought that by capturing what I saw, I could make sense of it. Maybe I hoped it would prove to someone that I wasn't going insane, that I wasn't hallucinating this nightmare. But now, as I ran, I realized how utterly useless that hope was. The photos didn't matter. The things in the fog of these creatures, these shadows with no faces, no humanity, they weren't going to stop. They wouldn't care about evidence, they wouldn't care about truth. They only cared about hunting. And I was their prey. I skidded to a halt at the edge of what I thought was another intersection. No, it was the same street. I'd run in a circle. I couldn't see anything but the fog. Not even the lampposts, the very things that had lured me into this mess. There was no escape. Every direction looked the same. The silence, broken only by the soft scrape of claws on stone, felt oppressive, like a lid was being slowly, methodically closed over me. I could feel the sweat pouring down my neck, my palms slick against the camera. The creature, the one closest to me, had stopped moving. I could sense its presence just behind me, its long, skeletal fingers flexing and curling. Turn around, the whisper came again, closer this time. So close it almost felt like it was inside my head. I couldn't face it. The last time I'd seen one of them, I had only caught a fleeting glimpse, a shadow against the fog. But the way it stood there, unmoving, waiting, I knew if I turned to face it, I'd see something worse than a nightmare. I'd see something that didn't belong in this world, something that shouldn't exist. But I had no choice. The words of the whisper had burrowed into my mind, and now they consumed me, gnawing at my thoughts like rats in the dark. Turn around. I spun on my heel, the camera still clutched in my trembling hands. The flash went off, briefly illuminating the fog once more. It was standing right in front of me. The creature was tall, too tall. Its limbs were unnaturally elongated, long, sinewy arms that hung down past its knees, fingers so long they could reach the ground without bending. Its body was thin, its shape almost skeletal, like a sickly, deformed human. But there was nothing human about its face or lack thereof. Where its face should have been, there was only darkness. A hole, an absence, a gap that seemed to pull at the very air around it. The space where its eyes should be stretched wide open, but nothing existed there. No white, no black, no depth. Just an infinite void. I didn't even think. I just raised the camera and took another shot. The flash illuminated the thing, but it didn't flinch. It didn't move, didn't react in any way. It just stood there, staring at me through the absence of its face. A horrid shiver crawled down my spine. It wasn't even staring at me, it was staring through me, seeing me in a way that made my skin crawl. The sound of its movements, the subtle, sickening scrape of its claws on stone, grew louder. Then, without warning, it took a step toward me. The sound was sharp and unnatural, like the screeching of metal dragged across the ground. I could feel my heart racing, my chest tight with panic. The fog was swallowing everything. I could see nothing beyond the creature. My mind screamed for me to run, but my legs were locked in place, frozen by the terror that had claimed me. I wasn't sure if I could even move anymore. The figure took another step closer, and then another. Its presence was overpowering, almost suffocating. I could feel the cold, unnatural air that radiated from it, like a grave, an abyss that threatened to pull me into it. The whisper came again, soft and wet, like it was right next to my ear, its breath sending chills through me. You shouldn't have looked. And then, like an animal sensing its prey's weakness, the creature moved. It wasn't slow anymore. It was fast, unnaturally fast. The claws came down on me in a blur, so close I could feel the coldness of them against my skin, the brush of air as they sliced through the fog. I managed to duck just in time, stumbling back, but it was too fast. I raised the camera, snapping another photo, the shutter clicking like a gunshot in the silence. The flash illuminated the creature once more, and it was closer. So much closer. I needed to run. I needed to. Something grabbed my ankle, yanking me backward. My body slammed into the ground, the camera flying from my hands and crashing into the pavement. The ground was cold, slick with moisture from the fog, and as I turned to see what had caught me, I found nothing, no shape, no figure. Just the empty, fog-choked street and the unending darkness beyond it. But I wasn't alone. The feeling of eyes watching me, the sensation of being held in place by something unseen, was overwhelming. I was being pulled back towards something I couldn't see. The scraping grew louder, more frantic, as if the thing had already sensed my fear, my vulnerability. I couldn't let it take me. With every ounce of strength I had left, I fought. I kicked and screamed, trying to break free, but the grip was like iron. I could hear the thing, hear it moving closer, its breath hot and wet against my skin. I had to get up. I had to. I reached out blindly, my hand landing on the camera. I grabbed it and aimed it at the thing, holding it with everything I had, just as the flash went off again. This time the world went black. You made it to the end of the stories. That means it's the perfect time to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you haven't already, leave a like and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have a great time relaxing, and good night.